First, I want to explore the question of whether historians now believe that this war was inevitable. Was the war avoidable? Second, I want to explore the connection, the interconnection of the war unleashed first on Poland and then throughout the continent with the final adoption by the Germans of extermination as the method whereby National Socialist Germany sought to attain its so-called final solution of the Jewish question. Third, I'll situate September 1st, 1939 in the context of historians' emerging views of the entirety of the history of the 20th century in Europe. And finally, I want very briefly to refer to three post-war developments that help to explain radical changes in Europe since 1945, and which, I think we all hope, indicate that in the future, new Septembers the 1st are less likely to occur. 4 points. You can keep track. So that when I can say, in conclusion, you begin to applaud. One of the deeply ingrained views of the interwar period is that somehow the former Western Allies could have, or should have, at some point, acted to prevent either the rise to power of Hitler and the National Socialists in Germany, German rearmament, German annexation of Austria in March 1938, and the Czech borderlands in September-October 1938 after the Munich Agreement, and thus the German attack on Poland in September 1939. Certainly, negative views of appeasement have shaped U.S. foreign policy ever since John Kennedy's Harvard 1940 senior thesis, polished and published in 1961 as Why England Slept. Jimmy Carter, when he came back from signing a SALT agreement, got off his plane at Andrews Air Force Base in a pouring rainstorm and refused to hold an umbrella because of the associations with Neville Chamberlain getting off the plane coming back from Munich. But Gerhard Weinberg and other scholars have pointed out paradoxically that Hitler believed that his triumph at Munich in September 1938 was in fact a failure, because he wanted the chance to attack and occupy all of Bohemia and Moravia by force of arms to demonstrate the power of German arms, and he blamed the delay in the demonstration of the force of the German Wehrmacht for his ultimate reverses that began in 1942. Aside from the question of how it is that foreign powers can possibly shape the domestic politics of a defeated but yet sovereign nation, particularly in the contexts of their own exhaustion, war weariness, and the imperial interests in the cases of Britain and France, and do this in an era of a new and noxious revolutionary political force with a base in the Soviet Union and an appeal to internal domestic working class constituencies. The fact nonetheless remains that National Socialist foreign policy and Hitler's personal views of the necessity of war wove a fabric of nationalist militarism and expansionism that in retrospect was unappeasable and likely made war unavoidable. Against the background of widespread German nationalism, bruised and traumatized by the harsh territorial, military, and economic terms of the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler, as early as April 1920, made public speeches that endorsed the inevitability of a German war of aggression. The foreign policy that Hitler pursued proved insatiable because of three interrelated assumptions that consistently shaped both his strategic and tactical activities. First, Hitler believed that German defeat in 1918 sprang in large part from its inability to feed itself from agriculture within its own territories while blockaded by the Royal Navy. Here I have to make an aside and say that the footnote in my paper is to the foundational work of a former colleague, certainly of Lois Scharf, who was retired by the time I came here, but Marion Saini, longtime faculty member at history, her book on the first years of the blockade remains the definitive work on the subject. Hitler believed that Germany was defeated because of the blockade. Influenced by geopolitical theories of Karl Haushofer, he also believed that Germany needed Lebensraum, living space. But where he differed from most German nationalists, and in truth, no German political party, including the Social Democrats, accepted the territorial settlement of Versailles until the Locarno Agreements of 1925. Where Hitler differed from most German nationalists was that he did not limit his aims to recovery of the 1914 borders of the German Empire. Rather, he aspired to vast new territorial empire in the East at the expense of Poland and the Soviet Union. For Hitler, German greatness depended on vast acquisitions of territory in the East, a breadbasket to render Germany immune to blockade. And he believed that territorial aggrandizement would come only by means of aggressive war. France, he reasoned, as the hereditary enemy of Germany, would do anything to stop this German drive to the east. So war with France was also inevitable. But he believed that Great Britain had no continental European ambitions that made it inevitable that a German expansion on the continent would lead to war between Germany and England. There, he proved wrong. Second, Hitler also ascribed defeat in 1918 to a stab in the back of the German army by forces inimical to the German nation. And he identified those forces as Jews and Bolsheviks, whom he equated. Alongside space, Lebensraum, Hitler ranked race as a crucial aspect in the struggle of nations. To attain the greatness it deserved, he argued, Germany must not only ensure its own racial purity, but must pursue its racial enemies outside German borders as well. National Socialist ideology of race not only had contempt for Jews, but rested as well on contempt for Slavs, particularly Poles, as racial inferiors. Thus, the presence of a large, new Polish state, possessed of rich agricultural lands that before 1919 had been part of German Prussia since the partitions of 1772 to 95, but also populated by more than 3 million Jews in comparison to the 600,000 in Germany, made Poland a clear future target of German military aggression. Third, Hitler's anti-Bolshevism and his conflation of Bolshevism with Jews not only provided one of the key foundations of his political and after 1932 electoral appeal within Germany, but formed a key component of his attitude toward foreign policy and war. He believed that revolutionary Bolshevism aimed in, and he always used Bolshevism instead of communism, so I'm adopting not National Socialist terminology here. Hitler believed that revolutionary Bolshevism aimed implacably at the destruction of Germany as a corrupt bourgeois state, so that war between Germany and the Soviet Union was inevitable. So the Bolsheviks, whom Hitler equated with Jews, ruled over an empire of Slavs, also racially inferior, and controlled the rich agricultural lands of Belarus and Ukraine, which Germany needed to attain agricultural self-sufficiency in an autarkic economy immune from blockade. Thus, an aggressive war against the Soviet Union could appear as a preventive or even preemptive strike against a malevolent regime steeped in an ideology that justified subversion, invasion, and murder. Hitler could cast expansion in the East as a defensive step, justifying it to himself with arguments that he would later use to justify it to the German people.